Our vision at Storied Church is to embody the inclusive love of Jesus Christ where every story matters.
And our mission at Storied Church is striving to embody the inclusivity of Christ by affirming and celebrating all people.
We do this by creating a safe and welcoming space where good can happen, cultivating meaningful relationships, where questions are explored and stories are honored.
We share life and ministry through gathering, worship, and service,
so that our community becomes more just, compassionate, and whole.
Which is Luke chapter 14, verses 25 through 35. And when I read it in my Bible, it says, it talks about how the disciples have to give up and what they have to give up to be disciples. So this is what this talks about. It says, now large crowds were traveling with him, and he turned and said to them, whoever comes to me and does not hate father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, even life itself, cannot be my disciple. Whoever does not carry the cross and follow me cannot be my disciple. For which of you, intending to build a tower, does not first sit down and estimate the cost to see whether he has enough to complete it? Otherwise, when he has laid a foundation and is not able to finish, all who see it will begin to ridicule him, saying, this fellow began to build and was not able to finish. Or what king, going out to wage war against another king, will not sit down first and consider whether he is able with 10,000 to oppose the one who comes against him with 20,000? If he cannot, then while the other is still far away, he sends a delegation and asks for the terms of peace. So therefore, none of you can become my disciple if you do not give up all your possessions. Salt is good, but if salt has lost its taste, how can its saltiness be restored? It is useful neither for the soil nor for the manure pile. They throw it away. If you have ears to hear, then hear. This is the word of God for the people of God. And now I turn it over to Leslie. Deep breath. You got that. So.
We did not, but isn't it lovely? All right. It is. It could be just sort of in our water. Like today's purple. Yeah. Hi, everybody. So I will say it's been a while since I've been up here preaching and looking at everybody, and I did not realize just how nervous I would be. I'm a little nervous, so we're going to go forward. I always like to start my sermons with a little bit of intention. I think a lot of times we've come from religious spaces where we've just had to believe whatever is told to us, and that is certainly not the intention here. And please forgive me if I tend to meander. So part of this is a personal reflection. It's a personal reflection and a bit of a love story to my dad who passed away. A complex love story to my dad who passed away. A bit of a reflection of a woman who has turned 50 this year and has been looking back on her life. Yes, I made it. I'm very happy to be turning 50. And then like some lessons, some spirituality that I kind of have learned along the way. And I promise the Bible passage will come back, and because I know a lot of you that may trigger some old damnness and fire and hell damnation, whatever, preaching, and that's not what this is. So always I'm inviting you into a conversation, I'm inviting you into my head, and hope that you take from this what is most relevant and hopeful to you, right? Helpful to you. So, okay. Now, I will say it's been a while since I've preached because it's been a tough year and a half. I will say, in April 2024, I lost my dad. He was diagnosed with cancer. No, that'll make me break down. No. And he lost his battle Sorry, I didn't realize I could get through this. I can. Due to a heart attack, based, I think, in part to the chemo treatments. He was 81, I think, 81, 82. It's weird, because 5 years prior to that, I lost my husband to a heart attack. And finding myself back in that space of grief has been challenging. Also challenged with that is the what every woman has to face as she comes into her 40s and 50s, and you have, scientifically estrogen depletion, which is hard to explain, but there was a point last year where I felt like part of me was gone. I didn't know where she went. I didn't know, what had happened to her. I just knew I felt a loss in myself that wasn't because of the grief of my dad or the grief of my husband, but was something else. I can say that estrogen, if you are able to take it, is a godsend. So that helped through this. And I've noticed a couple things, especially comparing the grief of losing a spouse early in life versus losing your father later in life, kind of as nature intends. Well, nature doesn't intend you to lose your husband, but as nature intends that at some point all of our parents will move on to that next reality, there's a difference. When my husband passed away, it was as though whoever I was exploded, and I had to spend the next couple years building her back, taking up piece by piece, examining it, and almost fitting a new puzzle of who I was in that reality. When my father passed away, and it really started as he got sick, I recognized there wasn't an explosion. There was really a coming into myself. There was a stepping into a new reality of my life, the next phase of my life, and really looking back on who I've been and claiming those pieces of who I want to become. And the picture that really speaks to me with this is what you see on the screen. This is not my wedding day. Secretly, I've been holding a secret from some of you. I am a card-carrying Southern debutante. This was my coming out party in a very different sense than most of us has probably had. Yes, this is at the Sumter Cotillion, where, at the ripe old age of 20, I was presented to Sumter Society. Although I remember my grandmother, my dad's mom, she loved a good party. And she was your typical Southern woman, except for she could not cook. But God bless her, she had help to help her cook. But I remember her saying, Leslie, it used to be that this would be telling people you're ready to marry, but you don't want to marry right now. So this just means you can come to adult parties. So it's so I'm very grateful for a family who could take it in on that. But I look at this picture and I look at the pride on my dad's face of who I was in this picture. And I'm somewhat at odds with it a bit. So the girl in this picture, she's 20. She's actually coming after a breakup. Unbeknownst to her father, you have to come with 2 escorts. So I think in this one, I had my brother and I had my gay best friend, who at the time was saying he was bisexual, but we all knew. So who escorted me to the debutante? I didn't even think about that until I was reflecting on this, of just how life kind of brings us through here. I've always wanted to be this demure, delicate Southern flower. I really have. And also recognizing I have never been that. I have always loved dresses. Like, I love dresses, I love jewelry, I love lipstick, clearly. But I have also always been the one maybe riding the bikes and holding philosophical debates with the men in my life and being very opinionated and loud, right? And I think sometimes my dad wanted the Southern Belle, right? And on this night, right, he is carrying the Southern Belle. And it's always been this sort of, tug of war and tension between us, of him both being proud of who I am, but never quite fully understanding who that is. Also in this picture, I am a bachelor. I'm working on my bachelor's degree in chemical engineering. But with a humanities, so at USC, you have to take a humanities concentration, right? Where you don't learn a skill, but you have to take like 5 humanities in a certain area. I chose religious studies. I did not know what I was getting myself into. I took comparative religion, I took Old Testament, New Testament theology, I took religion and culture, and I found a love of questioning and learning about religion through that. In some ways, a love that was started by my dad. My dad always encouraged wonderment. He always encouraged questioning. We would have these really great walks on the golf course where we would go after hours and pick up golf balls and that he would use in the driving range, or we would be out on the boat or on the dock at our lake house, really just having these deep conversations. At night, it might be the two of us, and I'd be watching Doctor Who and Star Trek and Twilight Zone, like the original one, the black and white one, and the revamped one, and talking about all the things in there, right? We talked about if the universe, the solar system, could be an atom within another existence, or whether Jesus was an alien. And some of that was cemented in the fact that when he went to USC and took comparative religion and started questioning his own Christian faith, when he went back to his small town of Sumter, South Carolina, where literally his dad, although he was a doctor in the area, helped to establish the Methodist Church there. And his dad's dad was a Methodist minister. He felt ostracized. People said, you can't ask questions like that. Like, there's a very similarity between Christianity and Zoroastrianism. And so he was like, what about that? And he was asking questions, and people shunned him for asking questions. And that deep hurt he took into our parenting, my brother and I. And he gave us the gift to allow us to find the truth that resonates with inside us. And surprisingly, weirdly, right, I have always grafted to some sort of structured religion. We didn't go to church as a family very often, so I went to a Catholic church with all my friends were Catholic. I don't know. And I loved going to church with them. I loved hearing the different messages and singing the songs and wondering and questioning and learning about God and the nature of God and the nature of the divine. And that, I think, is in part due to that gift of being able to be me, right? But he also, I think, always wanted me to be fairly and like a lady and demure and do this. And sometimes, I know later on, he'd be like, God, you're so loud. I'm like, where do you think I get it from? We can hear you across the room. He never would call my brother too loud, although he is. But so there's this also sort of thinking of like what women should be versus what men should be. I had a lot more in common with the escorts at this debutante than I did with the women that I was with. So fast forwarding, soon after this, I went on to my PhD program in chemical engineering. I am that kind of a nerd, and I wasn't a cool engineer. I was a mathematical computer programming. I spent 5 years working with the same 3 equations and trying to figure out how to calculate polymer absorption and predict polymer absorption on colloidal particles. I can't believe I can still say that. And I think one of my first heartbreaks where I had to deviate from my dad's path for me versus my path for me was when I had to leave the PhD program. A couple years prior to that, I was dying inside. Very similar to kind of how I felt earlier this year before hormone replacement therapy. Just feeling like something in me was not there. I was fighting myself to go in and, do what I had to do. I was depressed. I tried antidepressants. They worked, but then the anxiety would increase, and so I ended up just kind of quitting cold turkey. Do not do that. I wasn't on them for that long. And my last year there, I got involved with a NSF project where they were putting engineering teachers into elementary and middle schools. And for the first time in a long time, a spark was lit. I learned about, and my teachers are going to know this term, I learned about constructivism. So that's a theory in education where everybody comes with a construct of how they see the world. We have programs within our head of how we see the world. And teaching is not layering on knowledge. People are not empty slates. They have an understanding of how things work, even if it's wrong, even if it's a shallowness of what it's supposed to be. And we can help students, we can help learners, I would say, because I do this in my adult learning as well. We can help learners by helping them to see where the breaks are, where their constructs don't make sense, and then providing them experiences where they build new constructs. And that made total sense to me, and I was angry that that's not how I was taught, right? That I had to be a PhD student in chemical engineering, and I'm like, oh, I could have done so much better if I had been taught this way, right? I've had to struggle and learn how to learn because what was done to me in education was just knowledge thrusted on me. And we were in second and third grade classrooms. Now, I told you, I am a mathy engineer, right? I love symbolic math. Do not ask me to add, subtract, multiply, and divide in my head. I have only had to get better at that because I've had to do it over and over again. And I didn't understand what they call the standard algorithm until I was in a third grade classroom observing, and they were talking about place value and binary numbers and place value, and everything made sense. But again, this is what happens when we tell people what they're supposed to do without helping them to understand the why behind it, without helping them to come to what that's supposed to be. So my fire was lit, and I knew this is what I needed to do. Now, I will say this about my dad. He saw this, and he saw me trying to look for positions because the money was running out, so I was going to have to get a job. And I was looking at teaching colleges of engineering, thinking, well, maybe I could not do the research part of it, which is really what was dragging me down, and do the teaching part of it, because I really felt like that's what lit my soul. That's what lit my fire. And I feel like I went into engineering to escape being a teacher and found being a teacher. But to his credit, he had a friend in Charlotte, Mecklenburg. They were building a new school, and they were starting an engineering pathway in the high school. And this was very new in North Carolina. This was in 2002. It was the second school to offer Project Lead the Way or a true engineering pathway in high school. And I started it. But it also started my trajectory on questioning everything that I was taught from a racial standpoint, from a socioeconomic standpoint, from a political standpoint. I was in West Charlotte, probably the lowest economic area of Charlotte. Now, it was a brand new school, brand new building, but a lot of parents sent their kids to our school because they did not want them in West Charlotte at the time. Nothing against West Charlotte if you're from West Charlotte, but I'm like, just this is where the reality that I was faced. So now I'm in a system, in an area where I don't understand the rules. I'm reacting to what my students are giving me in terms of their behavior, and I am finding that I'm flailing at this. And I had a decision to make. I could rally against it. I could complain. I could gnash my teeth. I can do this. Or I could choose to lead with empathy, not sympathy, empathy, and put myself in their shoes and understand where they're coming from, learn more about how do I teach kids coming out of poverty? How do I look past my assumptions of who they're supposed to be and make a space, safe space for them to learn? And that's where my journey really started. I had to look inward at the questions and who I was as a person. What assumptions did I bring with me into this teaching and change them? I had to change my constructs. And I think it's after my dad passed and looking at that and going through therapy, I can see sort of these sort of moments in my life, right? And of course, I went from Charlotte to Winston-Salem, similar school, similar situation, and then eventually now I work across the country, working in schools to transform and make classrooms safe and exciting places for kids where they can be wondrous and curious and ask questions and learn in a way that fits them. Now, when my dad died, and so that's just kind of a little bit of my story, and I could say that I've stepped into this power, and I think turning 50 at the same time that my dad's died, I'm sitting in therapy, and things were falling apart. I remember it was in the Delta Sky Club, and I'm crying, and people are trying not to look at me, and I'm on the phone with a colleague. She's like, I think you need some therapy. And I'm like, I think you're right? I need to go back in, because I did go after that, and because she had lost her dad, so I was reaching out. And through that, I had started taking note of, even now, what are the programs that are still inside me that are my voice, that through the years I have been able to cultivate into who Leslie is, and what are the ones that are still popping up that are no longer serving me? Whose voices are that? Can I name it and either say, yes, I can accept you, or no, you got to go? And that is where I've been. And I was mulling all of that over during one of Jason's sermons. And it was the Luke 14 passage that cropped up in my head. Really more of that, not that we have to hate our mother and father, but we sometimes have to let go of those ties in order to be who we're meant to be. I want us to take back the Bible. One of the things that I had loved learning about the Bible when I was in undergraduate was it wasn't the stories that I was told. It wasn't the interpretation that I was told. There's a layer of context and history and there were stories that we weren't even told that were like I could come out. And normally I come to a Bible, and there's something called exegesis. That's your lens that you bring to the Bible, to your reading of the Bible. And there will be some people who say, well, I just read the passages as they are and take it as they are. And they're full of something that I won't say because I'm in church. Yeah, they're full of baloney. Thank you. I couldn't think of the politer word for that. They are full of baloney. And because we always are coming at it with our lens, right? We're coming at it with the baggage that we have and stuff. We're coming at it with our own assumptions, our own things. And we can take back a little bit of that power if we name what lens we're bringing to the Bible, to our reading. I usually take a feminist lens. I think it was in graduate school when I sat down to read Genesis, and I was shocked by the stories of empowerment, female empowerment that were there, even when they're trying to tell patriarchal stories. They're there. They're just buried. They're not always talked about. Right? So I urge everybody with some of these Bible passages that have been used to suppress you to take them back and rethink about them. So this passage in particular, again, in my Bible, the word hate, they say, was less about, what did it say? Hate is a hyperbole for rejection of any ties that might take priority over commitment to Jesus. Right? So Jesus we do know he does usually speak in hyperbole a lot, right? Like, don't take out the speck in your neighbor's eye without taking the log out of your eye, right? So there could be a sense of hyperbole here. And for me, what was coming up in that moment was that I have to cut some of those ties, those energy ties, those thought ties, those assumptions, those beliefs of where I came from if I'm going to be who I need to be. I think and especially if we believe that Jesus is the life, the truth, the light, and the way, we may have to deviate from what has been told to us as the truth and be centered into what we feel or seeing as the truth. Jesus was beautiful in how he talked about the kingdom of heaven, and almost, I wouldn't say I didn't want to count. I was afraid to count. But almost all the times he talks in terms of growth parables. Seeds scattered on a pathway, a mustard seed, yeast and bread. Or as a seeker, looking for the lost coin, looking for the lost sheep, looking for the lost sons. And I think that's what we're meant to do. If his vision of love and his vision of the kingdom of heaven is to be real, it happens over generation. It happens each individually over time that we grow and we change so that the next generation is better off. And if you look back at this passage, and when I looked back, I hadn't even thought about it, of where he talks about the person planning the tower. And if you have a foundation, but you don't have a plan to grow the tower, nothing's happening, right? If you have a force that's coming at you and you don't plan to fight that, nothing happens. And even when he talks about the salt losing its saltiness, one of the things they talked about here is in that time period, if you just let salt to be salt, it would lose its nutrients and it would lose its flavor. It would lose the minerals, would leach out. So they would just throw it out because it's not doing its job. When the whole job of saltiness in food is to open up our taste buds and make the experience richer, right? Have you ever had salt on watermelon or cantaloupe? Holy Toledo. It transitions that. Holy Toledo, yes. And through this, recently, I came across another interpretation, and where this is more sought out or more like cemented in is in the Old Testament book, the Book of Ruth. Now, I would say she's one of my favorites. When I lost my husband, it was Ruth who spoke to me. One, that I was grateful that I was in a time period where when my husband died, my livelihood didn't die with him, right? We could carry on our life, not the same as before, but we had a roof over our head. We had food to eat. We were safe and secure, and they did not have that in the time. What I've learned, there's a TikTok, I don't do TikTok, but Instagram person, Jeremy, he's a pastor and a deep skeptic. And I'm like, I like you, Jeremy. And he has a podcast called Unbelief, which I highly recommend because he's going through the Book of Ruth right now. And he shared a hidden meaning, a historical meaning that I hadn't known before, and I wanted to share with you guys of where this is. Because there are some people who think, I don't think in the room, but there are some people who think that the Bible is one single story told throughout history from beginning of time to now, and that is very much not the truth. And even in the Old Testament where we think it's fire and brimstone, there are seeds of contradiction. And right here in the book of Ruth is one of those. So during that time period that it was written in the Judges time period, which was a time of upheaval for the Israelite people. And, if you read the Judges, it was a lot of like, we want somebody to lead us. Here comes a judge. Oh my God, thank you. Now we're going to go crazy. Here comes another judge, right? And then it just evolves until they have kings. So there's a very much going through of this tumultuousness. And there was a subset of people, and he pointed to Ezra and the prophets Ezra and Nehemiah, who both push Israelites or say Israelites need to divorce their foreign wives to bring semblance back together. They wanted a genetically pure race of Israelites. Sound familiar? Yeah. But contra to that is the book of Ruth. They're telling a story of an Israelite man who went to the land of the Moabites with his wife and sons, where his sons found Moabite daughters and made a life there until tragedy struck. All the men died. And in that time period, a woman was left to begging, prostitution, or dying. Or maybe throwing themselves onto the mercy of whatever family they had left. And you had her daughter-in-laws really clinging to her because they loved her, right? They were Moabites, which are hated by the Jewish people. There's contention there. But this woman loved her daughter-in-laws enough to say, leave me. Leave me. Go throw yourselves back into your families so that you can survive. And Ruth said, no. She said, where you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die. There will I be buried. May the Lord do thus and so to me, and more as well, even if death departs me from you. And then when Naomi saw her determination to go with her, she said no more to her. And they struck out on a life that they had no idea what was going to happen. So she's literally taking her Moabite daughter-in-law right into the enemy camps and seeing if they can find a life for themselves there. And if you remember the story, they actually conspired to throw her in front of like their rich relative, right? Taking the power that they had at the time as women, who saw her, fell in love with her, and then ended up marrying her. And she was one of the women. There are 3 named women and 4 women in general that we refer to as Jesus' genealogy in Matthew. Ruth was one of them. And all 4 of the women that were named in the Gospel of Matthew in Jesus' in the genealogy section were women who were not Israelites. So I leave that to say, like, here's this example of a contradiction in the Bible, wanting us to look at both sides and choose something that makes sense to us, that feeds our seed inside of us. Sorry, I had things did not print off the way that it should. Okay. That we can go and they had no idea where they were going, but there was that small seed, that small voice within her that says, I may not know what will happen, but I can start a new future, a new life. So I can look back at my dad with his flaws. Later in life, he became very cemented in his values. He became less of the wonderer and questioner and more of the teller in my life. And we had, sometimes he would put his viewpoint on me. But I can see that he was the product of his upbringing and his lifetime, and he pushed things and questioned societal norms as far as he could, and gave my brother and I a foundation to continue that work. And I hope to continue that work for my daughter, to give her the foundation so that she will be who she's going to be and probably take off in directions that I know not what. My hope and prayer for you is that you can find the same. That, when we look at this passage and we're looking to, like, what's the cross that we bear? Some would have said, oh, that uncomfortable feeling at what we're telling you, that's your cross to bear. Right? If you want to be homosexual, that's your cross to bear. Jesus says not to do it. Actually, Jesus does not. Let's just put that out there. Nowhere does he discuss that. That is a societal norm that is passed down to us. But I think the cross to bear is that uncomfortableness of stepping out on our own. It's that uncomfortableness of leaving what we thought we knew for something different, and we don't always know, and that is uncomfortable. And I think my hope, and I know that some of you in here have had to overcome prejudice with the same people who claim to love you. You've had to speak truth to power and cut off family members to preserve that part of yourself. Probably the same people who hold up this scripture and say you are not following Jesus by doing X, Y, and Z, but you know that you are. You feel that seed inside you. You hear it inside of your soul starting to sprout. You see the fruits of love and gifts you give upon the world, and I pray that you find a safe place in this faith community to continue to water and grow that part of yourself. I wanted to leave you with a quote that probably summarizes all of this long and twisting sermon. It's from one of my favorite movies, My Big Fat Greek Wedding. If you haven't seen it, I feel old. But if you haven't seen it, go see it. I remember watching it for the first time back in my graduate school days. I actually love going to the movies by myself. I haven't been able to do it as much being a parent, but I love being able to sneak away and be in the dark. And that was sometimes where I found my my strength, or when I was hitting up against a programming wall. And I remember sitting there alone in the theater, entranced by the story that so resonated with my reality of coming into something else, someone else other than what my father would have wanted me to be. And her brother, right before her wedding, lets out this unexpected wisdom, because he plays not a smart figure in there, but he lets out this great nugget of wisdom. Don't let your past dictate who you are, but let it be part of who you will become. Your past is your foundation. It does not have to be who you are. Thanks.
Loved and fully known. Beloved, believe He died to make your heart His home. You are complete. You are completely loved and fully known. Beloved, believe He died to make your heart His home. He says you're mine, a smile when I made you. I find you beautiful in every way. My love for you is fierce and unending. I'll come to find you whatever it takes. My beloved, my beloved. He says you're mine. Smile when I made you. I find you beautiful in every way. My love for you is fierce and unending. I'll come to find you whatever it takes. My beloved, my beloved.